Welcome back to America Decides. President-elect Trump has already named several people for key positions in his new and still developing administration. This, of course, has generated a surge in speculation about what these selections do or don't mean for a second-term foreign policy agenda. Ravi Agrawal is joining us now to make sense of it. He is the editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine. I'm a subscriber, sir. It's great to have you with us.
My pleasure.
Ravi, what's your sense so far of the names mentioned or identified by the Trump transition team in the national security foreign policy space?
So identified is a good word because there's some disagreement about whether they've been confirmed or not. They are all loyalists. If you look at the key positions that have emerged, there is Elise Stefanik, potentially the UN ambassador, Mike Walls, from Florida, who would be the national security advisor. As you know, NSA has become a very powerful figure in U.S. foreign policy, partly because of just proximity to the president's office. Defense Secretary, we've learned that it is a Fox News anchor named Pete Hegseth. He, of course, has served in the military. All of these figures, what they have in common is they've been very clear about their loyalty to President Trump on many issues that others have diverged, whether it is January 6th and the insurrection or the fealty to the America First ideology. These three have not wavered.
Right, they have been in lockstep. A broad question for you, Ravi, if you please. How does the rest of the world view this momentous political event in America? With fear or with anticipation?
A bit of both. If you are in Europe, then you are scared. If you are part of the old world that relied on alliances, that relied on the post-Bretton Woods international order, the rules-based order, if you are from the world that likes the fact that the head of the IMF is always European and the head of the World Bank is always American, then you're very worried because Donald Trump is not going to care that much about alliances. He cares a lot more about bilateral relations. He sees, especially economics, in terms of what am I getting out of it? He is more bilateral than multilateral.
And transactional in a way that steps around or openly disdains multilateral institutions.
Exactly. He is not just transactional. At some level, all of us transact.
Of course.
He is nakedly transactional. And here's the other side of the equation. There are many countries around the world that are not scared of a transactional American president. In fact, that is what they want. So if you are, for example, Kenya or India or Indonesia or South Africa or Nigeria, you might look at that and say, actually, I want more transaction. I don't want an American president who's going to lecture us about democracy promotion or human rights and is going to challenge us on those fronts. We want to do deals, so bring on the deals. So it is a mixed picture. I think we tend to sort of reflexively imagine that every country on earth is looking at a Trump presidency and is worried about it. It actually opens up opportunities for many countries.
It has been observed already, Ravi, that with Mike Huckabee named ambassador to Israel, Elise Stefanik to UN, that President-elect Trump is already clearly demonstrating that his will be a pro-Israel, but also pro-Netanyahu American government. How does that simplify or complicate things in the Middle East?
Well, in some senses, look, Biden was also very pro-Israel in many respects. So you may not see much divergence on that front. In terms of trend lines, Trump is more pro-Israel. I don't think he cares as much about human rights. So, you know, whether the casualty toll in Gaza or Lebanon is something that he's going to shed a tear over.
Well, what about annexing Gaza or expanding settlements in the West Bank?
Very possible. I mean, Mike Huckabee has been quite open on that front about not really caring about those areas, using the old sort of Israeli terms for them, Judea and Samaria, instead of the West Bank. So those things, I think, would be immediately worrying signals for Arab countries, less so for Israel, of course. But Iran is an area that could be very interesting to see what happens. You know, among some of the names who've been mooted as potential national security officials in a Trump administration, there's a wide range of people who go from thinking, you know, in the America First tradition of not wanting to be embroiled in foreign conflicts, But you have all the way to the other end of the spectrum people who actually are arguing that, the United States should help Israel go all the way now and attack Iran's nuclear facilities. So there's a big divergence in optionality.
Settle many of the remaining unsettled scores in the region,
Absolutely.
if they can. Ravi Agrawal, Foreign Policy, it's great to have you. I hope you'll come back because this conversation will not end here and now. Thanks so very much.